Baptized in the Catholic Church, moved with his family from Puerto Rico to Chicago at age 10, Jorge Morales couldn't have imagined that he would one day join the United Church of Christ and eventually become the head of its Illinois conference. Reverend Morales has had an amazing faith journey, and he's here to share it with us today. We also welcome Reverend Morales' wife, Martha Mendoza, who is the Christian Education and Director of Youth Ministry at the First Congregational Church of Elmhurst and coordinator of La Academia, an organization helping to train leadership for ministry in diverse communities. And we welcome the youngest of his 4 children, Amarelis Morales, a junior at York High School in Elmhurst and a member of the First Congregational Church of Elmhurst as well. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your story today.
Well, thank you for having us. Bendiciones en el nombre de Jesucristo.
Thank you. And Reverend Morales, you grew up Catholic in Puerto Rico. Tell us about that experience and then coming here to the United States.
Well, in reality, Marie, I remember little about my childhood in Puerto Rico. I do remember very well, however, the wonderful reception and hospitality of the churches in Chicago that came to our doors in a time of illness and when we were facing a different culture, different language, the environment, the extreme cold, which was completely different. And the Warren Avenue Congregational Church on the west side of Chicago were very hospitable and welcoming. And they brought their love and they brought Christ with them to us and to our family.
I can imagine there was some challenges for your family.
I had been raised by my grandmother and my mother, and we came to Chicago at a time when our grandmother was beginning to suffer from Alzheimer's, and my mother had been a victim of polio when she was a child, so she was physically handicapped. And it was under those very difficult conditions, having come over because our uncles had arrived here and sent for us, but when they encountered difficulties with loss of employment and other things, we were in some pretty desperate situation, and it was really the church that came forth and showed great generosity.
That was Warren Congregational Church that helped you?
Yes.
Is that what drew you to the United Church of Christ, or can you talk about that journey?
Yes, I think very much. It was that experience at a time of much need. And later, as I met other leaders in the Congregational Church and the United Church of Christ, and a number of congregations that show the same kind of generosity and love. I'm in a great sense, Anne-Marie, the gift of the grace and goodness of the people in the church that embraced me and my family.
What were some of the other challenges growing up Latino in the Chicago community?
Well, I think one of the things that was very difficult for us was adjusting to some of the racial conflict that we had never encountered on the island where we came from, because it was difficult to distinguish there what we call in this our society a black person or a Caucasian person or a brown person. I mean, people were of diverse complexion, and I had never experienced, nor my family, some of the conflict, some of the rejections of people because of their distinct identity or racial appearance. So that was quite different for us.
And Martha, you're the youth director at the First Congregational Church in Elmhurst. Tell us about your role there and how that plays in developing children in today's society. And
it's been awesome. I've been there 11 years, and part of my many duties, and probably what I enjoy the most, is having the primarily Caucasian community that I serve there, expose them to become a little bit more global. We do that mainly through mission work trips. We have a partnership on the island of Puerto Rico, where we're from, and we do that every other year. And it's a wonderful place to go to, because where we end up is not in the commercial areas, so the kids get to be exposed to the language and the people and the culture.
And Amarelis, you've actually helped plan some of those mission trips to Puerto Rico. Can you tell us about that experience?
I've been to 2 of them to Puerto Rico. They've been really great. We worked in a deaf school with children. Some of them are orphans. We worked at an AIDS hospice house. And we also worked in the camp there. And it was really great work. We got to work really closely with the people and see how our work was really affecting them.
Tell us about that personal connection.
Yeah, there was a lot of personal connection. For example, when we worked in the deaf school, it was great because we actually not only got to work in the school, but we also got to spend time with the children and play with them and have lunch with them, break bread with them. It was wonderful.
How did those experiences shape you when you got back to the United States and being a high school student?
Yeah, I think all of us, when we came back, we had so much more appreciation for all the things that we have when we looked back and remembered how it was there.
And tell us a little more, Martha, you also are organizing La Academia. You said that's pretty new. Tell us a little bit about that program.
La Academia is something that that Reverend Morales had the vision to see that we expose the United Church of Christ. We've been for some time trying to bring the beautiful message of the United Church of Christ to the Latinos. And what the Academia works with is developing leaders. But what I'm excited about is the work they're doing with churches whom are housed, their actual buildings are housed in communities where they're very diverse, primarily Latino or African American, and they themselves have not linked to the outside of their churches. And so we try to help them and train leaders and develop strategic planning for outreach in their immediate communities.
Reverend Morales, maybe you can talk a little more too about what are some of the challenges still that the Latino community is facing.
One of the realities of our churches, and I can say that about some of our mainline Protestant churches, but I'm sure it's true about other traditions, that we in the Christian community tend to sort ourselves out into a particular race or ethnic groups. And I believe that one of the challenges for us is to discover a new sense of spirituality by engaging one another in diverse settings, and to discover Christ and God in the person of the other who may be different than we are. And our focus in what we do in La Academia and also with young people is to try to help to bridge some of those differences and to have new discoveries about faith. And I believe that today there are a number of writers and scholars who challenge us with the fact that some of this is spiritual. It's a spiritual challenge for us to reach out and know the other in a different way. I'm particularly amazed about the ability of young people who do not bring the baggage that we bring. In some of the work we've done with Amarelis and young people in Filipino, African American, Korean communities, we realize that our age provides for them new opportunities to be engaged through the internet in many other ways. Not bringing the baggage that we bring with us to create new relationships and stay connected to one another. I think that's one of the places where there's great hope for building new, diverse communities of faith.
What led you to the seminary and to your role today?
I think when I was younger, I in part was influenced by specific leaders in the church, those, the Martin Luther Kings, even the Jesse Jacksons, who is not much older than I am. But I had envisioned a church that empowers people. I think, and I wrestle sometimes with the traditions or the historical aspects that influence us in our faith. People of Latin American descent are in part very much when it comes to the religious community in our country, experience invasion, conquest. The history of the African American church in this country, I think with the struggle for slavery, I think informed the black community about the importance of the church being an institution of human liberation.
Thank you, Reverend Morales, for joining us. And Martha and Amarelis, I really appreciate you
Thank you
sharing
for having
your
us.
Yeah, I
Thank you for
appreciate
your
sharing your
hospitality.
story. I'm Anne Marie Gerhardt for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.